As we continue in managing personal finances, this is probably one of the bigger topics that we have is what's called consumer credit. You know, cash for a lot of us is no longer king. Credit card or debit cards, writing a check really isn't that common anymore, but or using a phone app to pay bills. So really, things are a lot different than when I was growing up with cash. You know, collecting coins and dollars and spending all that, there was something about that that felt pretty good. But the convenience of using these new ways of paying things, it's just too hard to resist for a lot of us, including myself. So an overview of consumer credit. So again, you can pause me and read these things yourself, or again, you can just follow along with me as well. But there is a lot of just things that really I'm just highlighting here. So feel free to pause and just read and then absorb it on your own and make your own notes. So consumer credit refers to the ability of individuals to borrow money or access goods and services with the promise to repay later. You may have heard of what's called a credit rating. The better your credit rating is, the more ability you have to borrow money, um, and not have to pay as much interest either. Because, yeah, there's usually this hook of paying interest when you do this. It plays a major role in personal finance management because it affects your spending ability, long-term financial health, and overall economic stability. So again, your ability to pay your bills on time helps you build what we call this consumer credit. So consumer credit allows you as a consumer to borrow now, pay later, spread payments over time, use credit, and manage large purchases such as cars, home appliances, and emergencies. So having that ability to borrow money is very important. So having a good consumer credit, if you will, pay your bills on time and people are willing to lend you money. So again, this is based on trust. Lenders believe borrowers will repay according to agreed terms. So if you can build trust that you're able to repay money, then your credit becomes very strong. So types of consumer credit. So a lot of this is where you borrow and set up a repayment schedule. A lot of times when I buy a car, I'm set up on a payment schedule where I have to pay so much per month. So car loans use this type of concept. So based on my consumer credit, I'm able to purchase a car, and if my credit is really good, then I get a really good interest rate. If my credit is not bad, then they will charge me at a higher interest rate. So it's important to keep your credit strong. So car loans, you probably are familiar with respect to student loans, paying back student loans. A lot of times with furniture, it's like 0%, same as cash, if you will, but you have to pay off the loan in a certain amount of time. It's it's very enticing, but you got to make sure you manage those monthly payments because you have to make sure you get that loan paid off in that time frame. Otherwise, all that interest will come back and really hurt you majorly because those interests are really major. I've kind of learned my lesson on some of that. Mortgages are also like fixed payments on houses. So again, when we get to this type of stuff, a lot of credit you have to pay back on a fixed monthly payment at a set interest rate. And there is a defined payoff period. So I know when my payments are done. That's the cool thing about these loans is you pay them and you know when your last payment is. Revolving credit, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated. Revolving credit can use repeatedly up to a limit. So credit cards, I can use anytime I want, but I have what's called a credit card limit. So I can only put on my credit card what my limit allows. But again, the key is making sure you pay back that money that you spent on your credit cards or a line of credit. These are both pretty tricky. Most common one is probably credit cards. Again, they give you a minimal monthly payment, but the hook in that because interest will add up in a hurry. So usually it's important that whatever you put on a credit card, your goal is to make sure you pay that off at the end of the month. So that makes things work in your favor. Otherwise, interest is charged on that unpaid balance. We'll talk about that here in the upcoming sections. So it allows you some flexibility in how you pay off things. But again, revolving credit is the most common, but it is also the easiest to misuse. That's what we kind of talked about here. Credit cards and lines of credit are out there. People want you in these, but uh, they're in there to make a profit, not for you to pay off things. So credit must be paid off in full in each billing cycle. So open credit is a lot of times my utility bills, cell phone plans, and some charge cards. So a lot of this applies to me for my utility bills and my cell phone plans. There's a billing cycle. So I just get a bill each month. It may change a little bit based on like how much energy I use, or if I'm a cell phone plan, as long as I don't do anything different on my cell phone plan, my cell phone plan bill usually stays the same. But utility bills, you really have to pay attention to your energy usage because they can get out of control in a hurry. And notice that failure to make payment here, you could have your service cut off, if you will, and then you have to pay to open it back up. There's fees attached to a lot of that stuff. Not actually interest, but just simply fees. So again, when it comes to credit, a lot of times in borrowing money, there's what's called the annual percentage rate. We deal a little with that with our simple interest and our compounding interest. So cost of borrowing it's money, a lot of times, like I said, it's expressed as a yearly rate, this APR. So that came from what we were doing earlier. Like I said, they're just giving it another name, annual percentage rate, APR. So the higher APR, the more expensive the borrowing is. So that's the catch is if you have a good credit rating, then this annual percentage rate will be lower. So again, you may be familiar with fees. So late fees, annual fees, balance transfer fees, over limit fees, all these come into play. You know, late fees and annual fees, for me, annual fees are like my taxes. So we'll probably see that here in a second. So these are what you have to watch out for is when you're getting into borrowing money, especially what are the fees if I'm late and things like that. So the credit report, like I said, if you have a good credit history, then that helps you have a stronger borrowing power. So they talk a lot about credit reports. Some of these are like Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I think I did an Experian one time, but the thing about credit reports, they don't let you do this too often. It's kind of weird. You can't check your credit history very often. So that's something you look into is how often can you actually look into your credit history. So credit scores, also called FICO, they range typically from 300 to 850. And again, they're based on your payment history, amounts owed, length of credit history, new credit card applications, type of credit used. Like I said, the higher score allows you lower interest rates, better loan approvals, and more favorable terms. So you probably see a lot of commercials about your FICO score or your credit score. So again, some advantages to consumer credit. It allows you to purchase major purchases without having the cash up front. Also, by doing this, you can build up good credit. So I've had friends who just paid in cash and then they had no credit history, so it's hard for them to borrow money. So provides safety and convenience. So credit cards, like I said, is very convenient. And a lot of times they're mostly pretty safe. My credit card company is pretty good about flagging me if they see unusual activity on my credit card. So I can cancel out my credit card and usually am pretty safe from people abusing my credit card. They're pretty aware where my credit card is. The nice thing about credit cards is the rewards part, cashback points. This is what I take advantage of. I pay off my credit card every month, and these cashback points make me money. So that's where there's some power in a credit card is not only do you build a credit history, but if you're good at paying back your credit card every month, you don't have a problem with that. It becomes a way to actually make money. So they reward you. And also, like I said, out of nowhere, if you have emergencies, credit cards can come very handy there because of that credit line. Some disadvantages and risk, of course, is higher interest can lead to long-term debt. So there's the hook. You know, with credit cards and stuff, they have a high interest rate that you don't really pay attention to until all of a sudden it's too late and you're not able to manage your credit card debt. So like I said, overuse can harm your credit score as well. So if you can't pay off your credit card, you can't pay off your debt, your credit score goes down. And when you're trying to borrow money, it's at a higher interest rate, which again impacts your spending power. Minimum payments keep debt cycling going. So watch out on credit cards is if you just pay the minimum payment, the cycle can get out of control. Missed payments, again, increase costs as well. That happened to me last month. I missed a payment, but luckily I was able to call the credit card company and said, "Hey, I don't miss payments too often. Could you remove those fees from my credit card?" And based on my payment history, they said, "Not a problem." They uh, they did not require me to pay the late penalty. So again, the spiraling out of debt can lead to a lot of stress, and stress is not good for us. Okay. So that's the challenge for us is making good decisions when it comes to uh, borrowing on our credit cards and things like that. Be responsible with your credit keys. This is the good practices. Pay on time. Pay more than the minimum balance on your credit cards, especially. You know, even when I'm buying a house, a lot of times I pay more towards the principal than just the minimum payment. So I had a 30-year loan on my house, but I ended up paying it off in about 10 years. So I had a low monthly payment, which if I got in trouble, I had some security. So make sure you pay attention to your credit reports annually. So it's not a bad idea to check your credit report. Yeah, I think you can do it once a year without any issues. Yeah, watch out for those impulse purchases. I was at Ollie's the other day, and it was very tempting to buy about everything in the aisles because everything just looks so cheap. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I've got $200 in my cart without even realizing it. Everything looked cheap at the time, but overall, it got expensive because I just kept buying everything. Another thing is, compare loans to credit card terms. Sometimes you may, if it's a big purchase, a loan may be better off than putting it on a credit card because, like I said, if you can't pay it off on a credit card in 1 month, it's tricky. But sometimes loans, you can do like 0% for over like 3 years and gives you a little bit more ability to manage things. So there's a little bit about talking about credit. It's a good thing, but it is a double-edged sword, so beware. Let's see if there's anything else here before I go on. Oh, yeah, there is a little bit more. Total cost of credit. So pay attention to the annual interest rates, pay attention to the fees, pay attention to how long it may take to repay something, and pay attention to the compounding because most timely on a credit card, it's compounded daily. And again, we'll talk more about this in our future lessons, how to pay off a credit card and how a credit card actually works on this compounding. So in summary, hopefully you have a little bit of understanding that how borrowing will work. Pay attention to, interest, especially when it talks about credit. Interest on debt grows really quickly, so be very careful of building uh of having money left on your credit cards and stuff like that. But the positive thing is if you pay off your credit card bills, it builds a credit score, which gives you more buying power in the future. So again, feel free to pause and read through some of this. This is some very valuable information for you as an individual.